Thank you all for tuning into another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl. Get to talk about on my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you guys can all find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Just did a podcast today, had Harrison Fagan on, Lakers beat writer and editor-in-chief for the Silver Screen and Roll, talked about everything Lakers. We dived into the Russell Westbrook trade, just teams that can compete with the Lakers in both the East and West, for the Lakers lineup. So big, if you're a basketball fan, love the Lakers, want to know what's going on with LeBron, definitely check out that podcast. And for the next pod, which I'll be recording tomorrow, I'm going to have Ben Karen on the podcast, and we are going to be doing our NFL predictions for week 2 of the NFL season and week 3 of college football, so you don't want to miss it. So first, here's what we have. Urban Meyer. So for those of you who don't know, or if you've been living under a rock, USC fired head coach Clay Helton yesterday. Now, Urban Meyer was a name that was linked. Urban Meyer was asked about it, and he basically said that there is no chance that he would leave the Jaguars to go to USC. Now, when I hear Urban say that, here's what I want to say. You do realize, and I said this last episode, Nick Saban said, I am not going to be that coach of Alabama when he was with Miami. He kept saying that every press conference. I'm not going to be that coach of Alabama. And you want to know what happened after the end of that Miami Dolphins season? Guess what? Nick Saban was the head coach of Alabama. Once upon a time, Kyrie Irving said, when he was in Cleveland, that he would never want to leave Cleveland, and he's blessed to play with a player as great as LeBron James. You want to know what Kyrie did about 2 months later? He requested a trade, said he couldn't play with LeBron James, didn't like how LeBron James was being a little brother, and got traded to the Celtics. Didn't even come back the next year, and they had just went to the finals. And then Kyrie went on record. He was like at a speech or whatever doing in that Boston TD Garden or whatever, and he said, I'll stay if you guys have me, to the fans. And you don't want to know what happened after that year? Kyrie Irving signed with the Brooklyn Nets. So you know what? When people say stuff, you can take that as a grain of salt. Like, people can feel one way at a certain point, and then things change, right? We don't always feel the same way about people. We don't always feel the same way about situations. So when Urban said, I don't want to leave Jacksonville, that might be true. But let's remember, how's Urban going to feel after the end of the season? If the Jaguars are awful, let's say they go 0-17, first NFL team ever to go 0-17, NFL veterans aren't really liking him. How do you think Urban's going to feel then? A little bit differently. So this is also what I want people to look at. College is better for Urban. It's a better job. And I think we always look at in professions, like if it's the highest profession, right, in football is the NFL. But it's not always the best, because college football coaches at the major D1 level, they're going to get paid more. Nick Saban gets paid more than Bill Belichick. Also, you become the king of the campus. You become like a de facto god. You become kind of deified. You are the boss. The presidents, the ADs, they answer to you, right? If you're Coach K, they answer to you. If you're Nick Saban, they answer to you. In the NFL, you answer to the boss who's cutting the checks, no matter how incompetent they may be. Also, you get to recruit talent. In the NFL, it's about parity. College football is nothing about parity. It's an arms race all the time, every day, all day. Also, you can control the media. Certain media members, they don't ask you certain things. You are able to maybe silence people in ways that you can't do in the NFL, right? National media is a lot bigger in terms of covering the NFL, and there's generally a lot more criticism of NFL coaches, and the job rate is, in terms of the turnover, is way higher than in college football. Like, for example, Derek Mason, head coach of Vanderbilt for like 3-4 years. Vanderbilt was awful, and he was still able to keep his job. Why? It's, they're like, hey, let's give him time. Let's have him get his recruits in there. In the NFL, as we've seen, it can be 1 year and done just like that. And also, Urban said that he was pretty retired when he had a cyst in his head. He said there was a cyst in his brain when there was stress, right? Now, think about this. He said there is a cyst in his brain that, that comes from stress and, high pressure environments, all that, right? Which makes sense. He's a football coach. There's a lot of stress involved in that type of job. Now, what's interesting is he then retired, which is fine, right? Because of stress. He then goes to Jaguars to be that coach there in a job. And I think we can all agree, the NFL is more stressful than college football. It's 10 times more stressful. You're dealing with grown men. You're also dealing with higher media coverage. You're dealing with a lot more egos. You're dealing with things you have a lot less control over. There's a lot more illusion. There's a lot more parody. There's a lot more stuff you have to deal with. So you want to know, it's a more stressful job. So you want to know what the assistant has said. He found a way to deal with it when it came, the chance to coach Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars. So you want to know what Urban is this? Urban is an opportunist. He's an opportunist. He goes for the best opportunity, what's good for him at the moment. Right now, at this moment, it is not good for Urban Meyer to say, I could be interested in the USC job. It does him no benefit. But believe you and me, after the season's over, is he going to think about it? Could there be discussions? Yeah, there should. And I think everybody's ignoring the bigger picture of Urban and just people in general if you don't think that's the case. So I want to get to some other stuff with the USC head coaching job. So Adam Schefter reported that Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy could emerge as a USC head coaching candidate. And I thought this was interesting. A lot of people were talking about, right, like Eric Bieniemy, he can't get a job in the NFL as a head coach, but he can be a college football head coach. And I would say this for Bieniemy, as what I said in terms of college being a maybe even better job in some cases than the NFL. If I'm Eric Bieniemy, I'm going to USC. It's a much better job. Like, would you rather coach, let's insert bad football team, the Houston Texans? Would you rather coach the Houston Texans or coach the USC Trojans, right? Here's what you get if you can bring, first of all, like I said, more parity in the NFL. It's going to be easier to win at USC. You have so much talent in the state of California. If you win, you're basically booking the fact that you're not going to get fired. They're going to keep you for as long as possible. And if you bring back the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart days, they're going to love you. In the NFL, they don't love a lot of coaches for that long. The only coach that I know that people swear by up and down is Bill Belichick. After that, you always hear rumblings. Even with Pete Carroll. Look at Mike McCarthy. They outed Mike McCarthy, who won a Super Bowl. And Aaron Rodgers, turns out he wants to leave too, right? So, better job in college. If I'm Eric Bieniemy, he's probably going to get a job with a really bad football team. There's a chance that he cannot make it past the first year. You have to get your quarterback. And college, it's a lot easier to get your quarterback, especially with transfers, right? Ohio State went from Dwayne Haskins to Justin Fields. You went from first-round QB to first-round QB, and then we'll see how C.J. Stroud turns out. Look at Alabama. They've gone from Jalen Hurts to Tua Tagovailoa to Mac Jones to now Bryce Young. If you can recruit, life will be very easy in college football, and it's that simple. It's X's and O's, more recruiting, more managing, more all that stuff. So I think Bieniemy should take the job if it is genuinely presented to him. So Dan Patrick reported other candidates. James Franklin and USC have mutual interest. Now, James Franklin was asked about this in a press conference, and he said energy and focuses on Auburn, basically ignoring the question. Tall tale sign right here. James Franklin's an opportunity. So he's throwing his hat in the ring. It could have been very easy for him to say that there is no interest. He doesn't want to went to, we're focusing on Auburn right now. And what that means is, again, in the moment, I am focusing on Auburn. After the game, I could be focusing on US. Like I said, like how you feel now isn't how you're going to feel later. And also, like I said last show, USC, the Pac-12, a lot easier to win there, better talent, more resources than in Penn State in the Big Ten. You get away from the big bad boogeyman in Ohio State. You get away from Michigan. You get away from Michigan State. That tough Big Ten East. You get out of that, right? You go to USC with all the talent out there in the state of California, with how weak the Pac-12 has been. I think it's something that James Franklin should look at, right? He went from Vanderbilt to Penn State to USC. Just the natural progression of going to one job to the better job to the better job. Other coaches, Luke Fickell out of Cincinnati, he was asked about if he would potentially, even he said the reports USC being interested in him. Now, Luke Fickell's a guy that I could see not leaving. I think he's the least likely of the James Franklin to leave. I think he's a guy that I believe he's very talked about, faith-oriented, very family-oriented. He loves living in Cincinnati with his family. Also, Cincinnati is moving out to the Power 5 conference. Will no longer be in the American, which will help their recruiting. And also, where they are at in Cincinnati, there are places like Indiana, Kentucky. They can recruit within the state of Ohio. Then you start plucking those recruits out of these different places like Florida here, California here, and you can build a pretty talented football program in an area like Cincinnati, right? right? Similarly to how Ohio State's doing. Now, I'm not saying that they can be Ohio State, but also adding the fact that they're going to be in the Big 12, I think that would make somebody like Luke Fickell look and say, hey, we can be building something here in Cincinnati. It's going to be Power 5 now. Now, lastly, I want to read this report. So Pete, he covers college football on Twitter. He put out names that USC is interested. He mentioned James Franklin, Luke Fickell, who I've already both talked about, PJ Fleck. He also mentioned Bill O'Brien, Mario Cristobal, Greg Schiano, Tony Elliott, and he said former coaches who could be sought include Chris Peterson and Bob Stoops. All names that everybody should be looking out for the USC job. This is top 5 job in college football. When you mention the top jobs in college football, I'll give you Alabama, right? We can say Alabama, let's say Ohio State, 2 bona fide blue bloods. Then if you want to go to the Big 12, we can say, let's say Oklahoma, and we can say Texas. Those are great jobs. And then at 5, you can say USC, right? You have the West. You have the West, right? There's the South, Midwest, and then there is the West. The West, tons of talent when it comes to college football, and all these people are going to be looking at the job. USC, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you get USC humming, right? It's like if people ever get Texas humming, if people ever get Miami humming, it's one of those places. It's a sleeping giant where if you get a place like that humming, you get the right support, you get the right guy in there, we could be looking at a multiple national championship type of program. Lastly, LeBron James, he wished Savannah James, his wife, a happy anniversary, saying, "Who am I without you?" He said, "Happy anniversary forever. Scary movie partner, my forever feet warmer, the Capricorn to my Virgo, and my bestie, my babe." 8 years down. I think we all talk about all these athletes all the time. You have to remember, like for LeBron, as busy as he is, as much as he commits to basketball, and he has kids, who do you think takes care of the kids? There's probably a nanny involved, I assume. I mean, he's almost a billionaire, but who do you think helps, that does all that other stuff, right? Probably his wife. Takes care of the home. Like, that's what happens with a lot of these athletes and a lot of people who have professions where they are out of the house all the time. And, it allows for LeBron to do what he does with a peace of mind. So I think it's always important. I also do want to say this fun fact. So they got married, I believe, in 2012. In 2011, he was not married to Savannah, even though they already had children. I believe she was like in Cleveland still, and he was in Miami. And I guess that was part of the reason that was hard for him emotionally. And then part of the thing was she said she would go to Miami. The kids would go to Miami with them if they got married. And they got married, and that was LeBron James' kind of mentally toughest year. And we saw him kind of rise and shine in all the big moments, the Game 6 in Boston. So I think all that's interesting when you really look at it in terms of peace of mind and what Savannah James means to him. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode Outside the Shop. Have a great